I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to be completely honest with yourself. If you woke up tomorrow in the year 330 BC, in the camp of Alexander the Great's army, somewhere between Persia and India, not knowing exactly where you are or where you're going, how long do you think you would last? And before you say you hold up pretty well, listen to this. The average soldier in that army carried between 30 and 40 kilos of equipment, marched between 25 and 30 kilometers every single day through terrain that ranged from 50-degree deserts to knee-deep mountain snow, ate whatever he could find or loot, slept on the ground most nights, and did all of this for consecutive years without ever going home. Not weeks, not months. Alexander's army was on active campaign for more than 10 years straight. An entire decade of marching, battle, hunger, wounds, and death surrounding them every single day. So the real question is not whether you would survive. The real question is how many hours would pass before your body or your mind said enough. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you about how that army actually lived is something no Hollywood film has ever had the courage to show honestly. And before we begin, if this kind of content grabs you, if you love understanding history from the inside rather than from textbooks, subscribe right now and hit the bell. And leave me one single thing in the comments. How many hours do you think you would last in Alexander's army? Give me a number. I want to see the answers. All right, let's enter the camp. Alexander the Great's army in 330 BC was not just an army. It was a city in motion. At its peak, the combined Macedonian force with its Greek allies, recruited Persians, mercenaries of multiple origins, and the enormous supply train that followed it, exceeded 100,000 people moving together across Asia. 100,000, with animals, with carts, with soldiers' families following the column, with merchants selling food and services on the margins of the camp, with engineers, doctors, secretaries, philosophers. Alexander never traveled without a group of academics documenting everything they saw. It was a logistical operation of a complexity that would not be repeated in Western history until many centuries later. And at the center of all of that was the Macedonian infantry soldier, the common man, the one who was not an officer, not a nobleman, not a horseman, the one who put one foot in front of the other every morning with 35 kilos on his back, and the hope that the day would end without a Persian or Indian spear finding him first. Let's start with the equipment, because that's where many of us would already be dead before even leaving camp. The soldier of the Macedonian phalanx, the combat formation that made this army famous, carried a sarissa. That word means nothing to you until I tell you it was a spear between 5 and 7 meters long. 7 meters, made from cornel wood, with a bronze tip and an iron counterweight at the rear. It weighed between 6 and 8 kilos on its own. In addition to the sarissa, the soldier carried a circular shield called an aspis, a short sword as a secondary weapon, armor of bronze or hardened linen, depending on his rank and resources, greaves to protect his legs, and a helmet that in many cases severely limited peripheral vision and the ability to hear orders in the middle of battle chaos. All of that together, marching under the Persian sun or the cold of the Hindu Kush mountains, for hours, every single day. The march was the first silent killer of that army, not the battles. The march. Modern researchers who have studied Alexander's routes calculate that his army covered more than 32,000 kilometers in total throughout the entire campaign. To put that in perspective, that is almost walking all the way around planet Earth, with full equipment, without running shoes, without physiotherapists, without anti-inflammatories, with leather sandals that wore down and were repaired and wore down again. Blisters were so normal that nobody mentioned them. Foot infections killed soldiers regularly. Burst tendons, destroyed knees, backs that simply stopped functioning after years of carrying heavy loads. All of that was part of the price of marching with Alexander. And here I want to pause for a moment on something I think is going to interest you just as much as this story. If what you just heard makes you curious about how these ancient civilizations built not just armies, but entire economic systems capable of sustaining operations of this magnitude, there is something in the description of this video that was made exactly for you. It's an ebook called The Secrets of Wealth of Ancient Civilizations. It is not self-help dressed up as history. It is a real study of how civilizations like the Macedonian, Persian, Egyptian, and Roman empires generated, accumulated, and protected their wealth with a sophistication that still teaches us relevant lessons today. It costs only €10. You can read it on your phone tonight, and by purchasing it, you are directly supporting this channel, so we can keep producing content like this. The link is in the description. Go check it out. Let's continue with the camp. Food. That is the second topic that would finish off most of us within a matter of days. The Macedonian soldiers' diet depended almost entirely on what the army could transport by or take by force as it advanced through enemy territory. The base food was grain, wheat or ground barley turned into a kind of porridge or flat bread cooked on hot stones. No leavening, not enough salt most of the time, no variety. That was breakfast, lunch, and dinner for entire weeks when the logistical situation became complicated. When lucky, legumes were added, olives and oil, dried cheese, dried meat from whatever they had managed to hunt or requisition. Wine was part of the daily ration, but not the wine you're imagining. It was watered down, acidic wine, closer to diluted vinegar than anything we would call drinkable today. But it served two functions. It provided calories and made the water less dangerous to consume because the alcohol killed some of the pathogens. Water. There is the third killer. Alexander's army crossed regions where drinkable water was scarce, where rivers were contaminated with the waste of a column of 100,000 people and their animals, where gastrointestinal diseases killed more soldiers than battles did. Dysentery was endemic, typhoid fever was common, and the medical knowledge of the era, though more advanced than most people realized thanks to Aristotle's influence on Alexander's education, had no way to stop an epidemic once it began moving through camp. It is estimated that Alexander lost more men to disease than to combat throughout the entire campaign, and that in an army considered, by the standards of the time, exceptionally well organized in logistical terms. Now let's talk about battle, because if you already survived the march and the food and the water, here comes what your modern brain is definitively not equipped to process. Fighting in phalanx formation is something no written description can fully convey. Imagine standing in a row of men so tightly packed that you are literally touching with your shoulder the man to your left and the man to your right. The shield of the man on your left partially covers your right side. Your shield covers the right side of the man on your left. The formation only works if nobody moves, only if nobody breaks the line, only if the man beside you holds exactly as you do, no matter what comes at him. In front of you is another wall of men who want to kill you, and between you and them are sarissas pointing forward, yours and those of the rows behind you, creating a barrier of spear tips that extends several meters out in front of the first row. The noise is indescribable. Ancient historians who tried to describe it speak of a sound that made the earth tremble, a mixture of screaming, metal against metal, orders that nobody can hear clearly, and the specific sound of spears snapping and shields crashing into each other. And you are there, in that, without noise-canceling headphones, with no way to see what is happening beyond the 2 meters in front of you, without knowing whether the left flank is holding or whether the enemy cavalry is surrounding them. Following orders that arrive as distorted shouts, you can barely distinguish from the general chaos, trusting that the man beside you is not going to panic and break the formation, because if he does, everyone dies. That is what these men did, regularly, for 10 years. And they did it for Alexander. That is what fascinates me most about all of this, and what is hardest to explain from our modern perspective. The loyalty that man generated in his soldiers had no precedent in the ancient world. Alexander ate the same as his soldiers when rations were scarce. He marched on foot when the terrain was too difficult for horses. He personally threw himself into combat on the front line, which was an absolute tactical insanity for a commander, but which generated in his men a level of fanaticism that no speech and no pay could ever buy. He was seriously wounded multiple times. At the Battle of the Granicus, he nearly died decapitated. At the Siege of Gaza, he received an arrow in the shoulder that pierced through his armor. At the city of the Mali in India, he received an arrow in the chest that punctured a lung and left him unconscious. His own generals dragged him out of there while the rest of the army panicked, believing him dead. And when he recovered, he went back to the front. He always went back to the front. Write in the comments which part of this story struck you as the most brutal. The 30-kilometer daily march? The phalanx battle? The fact that Alexander personally fought on the front line? I want to read your answers. And if you know someone who is into military history, share this video with them. Those comments and those shares are the oxygen of this channel. Now comes something that very few people know about the end of the story. The army that survived the entire campaign, the veterans who had marched from Macedonia to India and back, were men unrecognizable compared to those who had left their villages years before. Not only physically, though that was evident, bodies destroyed, scars from multiple wounds, lost limbs, ears permanently damaged by the noise of battles, but psychologically, modern historians who have studied the available testimonies recognize in many of these veterans what we would today call post-traumatic stress disorder. Men who could not sleep, who startled at any sudden sound, who had seen so much death and had killed so many people that they could find no way to return to a normal life. The ancient world had no name for that. It had no treatment. Veterans returned to their Macedonian villages as strangers to their own families, carrying things they could not explain in words their language had not yet invented. Alexander died in Babylon in the year 323 BC. He was 32 years old. The exact cause of his death is still debated. Poisoning, typhoid fever complicated by excessive alcohol and accumulated wounds, or a combination of all of that. What is a fact is that when he died, his army refused for days to accept it. His generals entered the chamber where the body lay to personally verify it was true. They could not believe it. The man who had seemed invincible for an entire decade had simply gone, and the empire he had built in that decade fragmented almost immediately. His generals, the Diadochi, the successors, spent the next 40 years slaughtering each other to claim pieces of what Alexander had united. All that effort, all that marching, all those battles, all that collective suffering of hundreds of thousands of men over 10 years ended up dissolving into civil wars that had nothing to do with any unified vision of the world. But something remained, something that no civil war could undo. Greek culture, the Greek language, the philosophical and scientific and artistic ideas of the Hellenic world had spread from the Mediterranean to India in a way that permanently changed the history of humanity. The cities Alexander founded along his route, many of them named Alexandria, became centers of knowledge and commerce that functioned for centuries after his death. Alexandria in Egypt, with its legendary library, was for generations the place where the knowledge of the ancient world concentrated and was transmitted. That is Alexander's real legacy, not the battles, not the conquests, but the idea that knowledge and culture could travel as far as armies and stay much longer. And with that, I return to the question at the beginning. How long would you last in that army? Honestly, most of us would not make it to the end of the first day of marching with full equipment. Our modern bodies, accustomed to chairs, to mattresses, to processed food, and to not walking any more than necessary, are simply not prepared for that physical demand. And that is not a criticism. It is simply the brutal distance between the world we inhabit and the world they inhabited. What we can do is understand that world, study it, learn from the systems they built, from how they generated wealth, from how they organized societies capable of moving 100,000 people across Asia with an efficiency that still astonishes us today. If that interests you, the ebook in the description, The Secrets of Wealth of Ancient Civilizations, is exactly that. €10 tonight on your phone. And every purchase directly supports this channel, so we can keep bringing you real history, unfiltered and never boring. The link is in the description. See you in the next video.